Kalama for S24.
Rescue crews have been racing to find survivors of floods that have wreaked havoc across Western Europe, killing more than 120 people. Hundreds are still missing after record rainfall triggered severe floods in Germany and Belgium. Heavy rains also hit Switzerland, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, where Prime Minister Mark Rutte has declared a national disaster in one southern province. European leaders have blamed the extreme weather on climate change. Experts say global warming makes torrential rainfall more likely. To give us an update on this, we are joined by our S24 reporter in Brussels, Belgium, Lucy Hough.
Good evening. Well, that's right. I mean, the desperate search for the missing is now being carried out across Western Germany and here in Belgium, with hundreds still missing in Germany, 20 missing from this region of Wallonia in Belgium following the flash floods that hit overnight on Wednesday and continued through Thursday. Where I am now, this is one of the worst affected regions in Belgium. In the neighbouring village, 6 people in one small town died after being hit by flash floods that were described as being akin to a tsunami. Homes and businesses have been ruined. People are describing having lost everything, being trapped in their homes for 48 hours with no power and no access to clean water. The rescue operation is continuing with hundreds of emergency services drafted in. The military has been drafted in Germany and here in Belgium. Certainly Belgium has received bolstered support from neighbouring countries such as the Netherlands. There is a risk of further flooding. There is a warning that of the risk of potential flooding. It's around 10 kilometres from Brussels, the capital of Belgium, that there are around 10 houses that are at risk of collapse, with a river running dangerously high there. A dam burst in the town of Luxembourg in Germany last night, local time, causing around 700 people to be evacuated from their homes. So huge destruction, and a sense that this is not over yet.
Now, Lucy, do we have an estimated, an estimation of, or rather an estimate on the number of people that have been affected by the floods and have been evacuated?
Well, we're talking in the tens of thousands of people who've been affected. I mean, in this region alone, there are 13,000 people currently with no access to power or clean water or gas. We know that tens of thousands in Germany, given the scale of the flood damage there, are being affected by this. There is a desperate operation now to ensure that clean water can be got to those houses who are currently without, that power is restored, but much of the distribution points are currently inaccessible due to continued damage from the floods and road closures, as well as water damage. So a continued operation to restore power in those areas. In terms of the death toll, it currently stands at 157, around 133 in Germany, 24 here in Belgium, around 20 missing, hundreds more missing in Germany. There is a hope that some of those people are just untraceable, and that this is a case of people not being able to charge their phones and therefore be contacted, and that perhaps there will be more survivors, but there is a fear that the death toll will continue to mount in the coming days as the recovery operations continue.
Now, during this tense situation, how has the government responded to this situation?
Well, the Belgian Prime Minister has described this as the worst flooding in history in Central Europe. He's described this as a catastrophe, saying that at a moment when Belgian people should have been celebrating a hot summer's day, they were hit with one of their darkest few days in living memory. He's declared a day of national mourning next week on July the 20th. The German leadership, the President of Germany and the German Chancellor have just made the express link between what has happened here, the torrential rainfall and the flash flooding, as being linked to climate change, saying that what has happened shows the urgent need to deal with climate change. And that has been a message that has been reiterated by the presidents of the European Council and Commission, the EU, in Brussels. The German environmental minister has said that this has made it clear that climate change has finally truly arrived in Central Europe.
Is this the first time for that area to encounter such kind of a scenario? Or is there any advisory in place if there will be more rain coming to the region?
It's certainly not the first time that there's been flooding. I mean, people here have been saying that they're used to floods in this area, but they've never seen anything like this in terms of the height of the water that forced people to climb up into their roofs or to the upper floors of their homes to await rescue. Some, of course, not managing to survive after being swept up in those riptides. These are completely unprecedented in terms of the scale of the disaster. There had been some serious floods back in 2002, 21 people in Germany who lost their lives at this point. There was also a death toll here in Belgium, but again, nothing of this scale. There is some questions about the extreme weather warnings. We know that there were warnings put out at the start of this week, but really they weren't heeded to by local authorities and governments across Central Europe. There's a feeling here that the communities were caught completely by surprise by the scale of what was to come. So there will be questions to be answered in the coming weeks and months about why those warnings weren't transmitted properly and the vulnerabilities in flood warning alert systems.
Now, Lucy, this COVID-19, which seems to be the pandemic that has grappled the world so far. And following the declaration of the Prime Minister Mark, who declared a national disaster in one southern province, has this also affected the government's efforts in curbing the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I mean, the feeling, I think, is one of great catastrophe. We've just been into a rescue centre where people were just trying to get basic supplies of clothes for their baby, of nappies, of basic foods and water, having had their homes destroyed. In that centre, there was really no adherence to social distancing guidelines or any of the sanitary measures that have been put in place. Given that people have been forced from their homes into crowded rescue centres, given that there are worrying new variants such as the Delta spreading through Western Europe, there is a concern that what has happened here will force people into situations where it is impossible to adhere to those guidelines, and therefore we could see outbreaks from the communities where people are just desperately trying to recover what they can of their livelihoods. So that certainly is a concern. I mean, there are high levels of vaccination now here in Belgium and in Germany, but certainly that is something to watch in terms of whether there are clusters of infection as a result of what has happened here.
Lucy, before I let you go, is there anything else that you'd like to put across in a way that you love to put across?
Well, I think just the scale of the disaster, witnessing people who in just the space of 48 hours lost everything, you know, businesses that they had invested in over the course of the last few years laid to ruin. There are people who are looking to how they're going to claim that back via insurance. They are looking to the government for support, and certainly in Germany, the German Chancellor has pledged the full force of the state in terms of people rebuilding their lives, but the devastation will be felt here for months, if not years to come.
Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for your time, and thank you so much for the brilliant update that you've given us. Thank you so much for your time.